Representative Roberts again from Santa Quin. This is working out good for me. Every now and then I get asked to speak in church, and me and my wife do, and I have my wife go first, and it's great because I get left with 3 minutes. So this is working out good for me. Mike and Francis, speaker. Anyway, like Mike said, we are the two youngest up there, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm keeping tallies of how many times I get confused as an intern. By interns, we have these green coats that run around and nab interns, and they nab me every now and then. So that's been fun. Yesterday, I had my first bill on the floor, learning some procedural processes, but I will say I got a unanimous vote except for a representative from Springville who decided to stay, which was just fine. Apparently they like to tease new freshman legislators up there on their first bills.
Hazing?
It's called hazing, yeah. Deidre experienced it in the Senate side. And Mike hasn't had his turn yet.
I know, the board will red.
Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun, learning process. I sit on the Social Services Appropriations Committee. And we deal with, after education, this is probably one of the committees of all committees. We meet every single morning at 8 o'clock, and we hear all the issues having to do with Medicaid expansion, Department of Health, how we're going to do all of this, and it's quite mind-boggling, the number of acronyms, the federal programs, the federal matches, the state requirements, the waivers, how the waivers work. I go in with our analysts once a week and get another Medicaid 101 overview, and I still can't get past Medicaid 101. It's that complicated. So, Francis spoke to the cost of this that we're going to have to incur, and I'm not sure if you broke it up or not, but much of this cost is just administrative costs because of the expansion. It just costs to handle the caseload that we're going to get of all these people that are now going to come on and say, hey, because of this mandate, I got to have insurance. The state's got to sift through all these people, and the state needs people and infrastructure to sift through all these people to figure this out, to figure out the eligibility, to figure out the requirements. And that alone, that cost alone is going to be a multi-million-dollar ongoing cost to the state. The state, it's new money. It's new money that the state has to come up with. And then if you start adding the matching funds that will start hitting us in 3 years, right? That's on top of the administrative costs. So like Speaker Lockhart said, this is money, one, that the federal government doesn't have to begin with. We pay our taxes, we send it to the federal government, and it pays the debt. And then they print more money, make more debt, and send it back to us. So in essence, they're taking money out of our children's bank accounts and giving it back to us to pay for our neighbors, ourselves, our different programs here. I served an LDS mission in Argentina in 2000 to 2002, and in the fall of 2001, we were teaching this family, and she said to us, elders, you need to go home right now. And I said, well, why do we need to go home? We want to baptize you. And she said, no, you got to go home. There's a curfew in the town here. In the country, there's a curfew. The military is marching around the streets. You got to go home. So we went home. We were quarantined to our houses for a few days, and overnight, so when I got to Argentina, the dollar and the peso, the ratio was 1-to-1, the exchange rate. Overnight, it went to 12-to-1. It was a mess, okay? People, their lives were destroyed. That's a huge increase. The value of their purchasing power just decreased like crazy. You couldn't go to a bank to get anything out of the banks. We couldn't walk around because they saw us and people saw dollars. because they wanted dollars. They didn't want their pesos. They went through 6 different presidents in 2 weeks. It was pretty crazy. So this inflation thing that Speaker Lockhart talks about is a real thing. Read your history, like she talks about. There isn't a country in the history of the world that has ever been able to print money and keep printing money with a smile on their face, and everything keeps going nice and dandy. It's never happened. So to think that we are an exception, I think, is naive. And so we need to be very careful about what we keep accepting from the federal government, the commitments we make to them, the money they send to us. We're walking a very dangerous line here that is unsustainable. And I've experienced it firsthand in Argentina. It's just a prolonged for us here, but if we're not careful, it'll come. Deidre Henderson, Senator Henderson, is working, is it a task force, the Financial Ready Utah? Talking about what we can do as Utahns to become financially ready, to become self-reliant, self-sufficient as a state, as a people. And I feel very strongly that's the direction we need to go in. I sit on the Social Services Committee, and I have people calling me all the time, different programs. They need money. They need a fund. There's all kinds of programs. Baby Watch, early childhood intervention. There's people with disabilities programs. Somehow, I really feel like the conversation in Utah's it has to change, and it has to start with us. The conversation has to change from government, what can you do to solve my problems, to neighbor, I need help. Okay? And we as a people need to start looking to our neighbors and seeing what we can do to help them. It's the only way this cycle is going to reverse. We send millions of dollars out of the country every year to Africa, Guatemala, Nicaragua, which are good things, helping those people. Somehow we got to reverse the conversation, and we got to look to our neighbor. While we're sending money to people in Nicaragua, our neighbor down the road has cerebral palsy and is getting all these services from the state, which is taking money out of your children's bank account to pay for it. So as people, somehow we got to start changing this conversation. We got to help each other. I don't know how else we can do it. I don't know how else we can get out from underneath this financial avalanche, as Senator Lee calls it. But it's a fun time. It's fun to be up there. The senior members are very great, very gracious to help out and teach us younger ones the ropes, the process. I sit on the Business and Labor Standing Committee, and we approve bills all the time. We push them through, and the other day we killed a bill in Business and Labor. I tell you what, I have not had as much fun up there the whole time killing a bill as I have passing bills. It's a lot funner to kill bills than it is to approve them and get them through. Like Speaker Lockhart said in her speech to us, we have too many laws. 200 pages we had every year. So few of us took her seriously, so we're killing bills. Just anyway, I'll be happy to take any questions. This is my neighbor here.
Yes, it is. You talked a little about the financial responsibility we have and how much of our budget right now is going to Medicaid, and what kind of responsibility do we have? Obviously, because I know in the federal level, 2/3 of the budget goes to Social Security and Medicare. I know as a provider, as a chiropractor, these programs are being run by the state and by the federal government. Give me diddly squat, and you always want to opt out the best you can because they don't give you your return as a healthcare professional for what you do. At the same time, recognizing that the money, there's no free healthcare. It may sound like it's free to a person who's going to the state, but someone's paying for it, and that rolls back to us as members of the state. So how much of this money in the state is going right now to healthcare, and how can we prevent being in the quagmire, I guess is the word we love to use, of putting too much out there and end up paying for it, like paying for your neighbor down the street.
So if I understand you correctly, how much of the state budget right now is currently
In healthcare, for Medicare, Medicaid.
What's our social services portion, Becky? It's a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's social service, education's the biggest, and it's social services, but social services is growing at a rate faster than education, correct?
Yeah,
I
it
see.
will overtake education
Yeah,
with Obamacare.
right.
I'm seeing lots of people right now as a provider that do not have insurance. A lot of times what I do is I just work with them the best I can. You know, I want people to get the care they need. So I'm kind of on both sides of this issue. I see people who don't have it that need it. And I see people that, and I recognize that there's no such thing as free healthcare. The cost has to come up on us somewhere. I served in Argentina on my mission too, so I was right there before you.
Yeah.
And so I saw it happening, and I remember the history in Argentina. It's actually a good YouTube video if anyone wants to go look for it. It talks, you know what I'm talking about? It talks exactly about the same issue of where they went with hyperinflation over the years, and how we are, if you look at it, we're correlating a lot in the U.S.
Yes.
With all of you, if we can take it back to something personal here. Rick, what's the starting salary for a school teacher?
$30,000 roughly.
$30,000, which is equivalent to about $15 an hour year-round. Right now, if they don't have insurance, which they do, but if they didn't, the penalty for them not to have insurance is, do you have any idea what that number is under the Affordable Care Act?
It's just $900 the first year, but it ramps up to almost $3,000 a year eventually.
So $3,000 a year they'll be paying on taxes versus it'll cost them, if they had to go buy their insurance, about $1,000 a month for a family, $1,000 to $1,500. So they're gonna pay $3,000 in taxes or $12,000 in insurance. From a state standpoint, they would qualify for Medicaid, every one of our starting teachers, based on the federal poverty level. Do you know what is the upper limit for people coming on to Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act? What's the salary limit, do you know?
It's the federal, it's what, 138% of the federal poverty level? And I don't know what that federal.
I've heard that's close to $70,000 annual income.
I do know that at the end of the implementation years, several years, a family of $90,000 income would qualify.
Would qualify for
That sounds right.
So that's what you're looking at.
A lot of people.
That's a lot of people in the state of Utah that would opt into Medicaid
Yeah.
as part of the state budget. That's one of my real concerns is once you start the penalty aspect, either you pay that much money or you opt into the state Medicaid fund. It's no longer, well, I'm against government handouts because I'm self-reliant. It's, I've got a $3,000 tax penalty, or I take state Medicaid, which is now mandated by federal law.
Shifting tax. Yeah.
So when you put it in that perspective, we've got a big thing to carry here in the state to decide how we're going to.
No, that's great. Taking it down to that level, and it's,
The Medicaid number.
yeah.
Last year's budget, both general fund and other revenues into social services, which is mostly Medicaid, is about 1.7 billion state funds. Then you add on the 2.5 billion in federal.
Yeah. Thanks, Becky. Yes.
Over 30% of the state budget.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments. Mark Donaldson, I'm one of Scott Barley's employees. Anyway, I just came back from Philadelphia visiting my daughter last month. And that city, where they live, is a welfare state. They already have the infrastructure in place to expand Medicaid. people on welfare. And in my perspective, I just see a bunch of, like 17 red states finally backing out of the expansion of Medicaid. And our federal dollars are just going to make it that much easier for them to get the federal track, you know, to keep up the system they got going. The other thing in my perspective is I'm a delegate to the Utah Medical Association. And at our last meeting last September, there was a big push to make a resolution telling our legislatures that physicians of this state really want us to accept the Affordable Care Act. And in the last session, I was able to change the wording to say we want more people insured because people are hurting in the state. And in all of the discussion, there was anecdotal, sure, but many people, many physicians standing up and saying, these people are hurting. They're not getting care soon enough. Therefore, their diabetic legs getting amputated when it could have been saved. You know, that was one of the examples, but numerous examples. The physicians are seeing it. We have too many uninsured, and they just want more people insured, whatever it takes. And we were able to change the wording so it wasn't so offensive to our legislators, because most of us feel like they do that this thing has been foisted on us, the Affordable Care Act, and it's untenable. We can't afford it. But those federal dollars are going to just go to the people that are prepared to receive them. So I just see a bunch of red states feeding the blue states. And it is a big quandary we're in. It's a mess. Thank you.
We're out of time. Let's take one more question. We got one hand up. Go ahead, Mark, if you want to take that.
I was just going to comment on that. I understand your argument, I understand what you're saying, and I don't know as much as that we're feeding them. They're robbing it from our children. Because any money we send to the federal government, none of it comes back to anybody. It's new money they print.
I'd like to just make a comment. And the comment is as I was voting this last year, the line at the elementary school was very slow. And so I read all of the documentation that they had on the door. And when it talks about voting, and I'm referring to immigration here, to get the criteria to vote, I had to be able to show residency. In other words, where do I live, which I had to provide like a utility bill. I could provide a note from my bishop to say that I have residency here. But nowhere in that bill, or nowhere in there did it say that I had to show citizenship. And so if you take a look at the elections this last year with the power of the immigrants, illegal immigrants, they do have, I gained the impression that they had the right to vote because all they had to do is show residency. And I think that that's something that this country needs to look at really well, and that is if we're going to have people voting that don't represent our interests, when they don't have citizenship, to me that's a concern.
Thanks. All right, I want to thank you all for your questions and for your time being here, and thank Speaker Lockhart and Representative Gibson, Representative McKell, and Representative Roberts for being here. Join me in giving them a hand for their time. At your tables, there is this contact form, and they wanted to make sure that you understand that if you would like to have updates on legislative issues through the session, that if you'll fill that out, then they use that to be able to get back to you specifically. And it asks for, as you can see, your name, address, phone number, and email address. So we invite you to fill that out if you'd like to have updates periodically. I also want to thank the Spanish Fork, Salem Chamber, the Springville Chamber, and the Payson Chamber and the Nebo School District for hosting this event. We appreciate all of their efforts to promote it and to organize it, and the individuals that spend a lot of time doing that. It's greatly appreciated. I also want to thank Scott Barlow again and Central Utah Clinic for the great breakfast. Appreciate their efforts there and that sponsorship. Our next meeting will be March 2nd from 7:30 to 9, again in this location. And the two topics we'll be talking about are education and public lands.
And I just want to tease a little bit who we'll have presenting at that meeting. So we'll have Rick Nielsen, the superintendent of the Nebo School District, presenting. Mark Bouchard, who is the CEO of Prosperity 2020. Representative Gibson will be back again as chair of Education Committee. We'll have Mark Openshaw from the State School Board, and Representative Ken Ivory, who is on the American Lands Council. So those will be the people presenting, and we'd like to field questions at that event as well. So please plan to attend. We do need RSVPs, so please try to remember to notify one of the chamber members that you want to be in attendance, because we need to have a food count and make sure we have enough chairs for everybody. So please do that. The other note, this was our first meeting, so we were a little slow in getting started. We're going to try to start on time next month, right at 7:30. So if you can be here a little bit ahead of that to get a plate and get seated, but hopefully we won't run over. So thank you again for your attendance, and thank you for your time.